The cinematographer for Jurassic Park, who also shot Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Apollo 13 and Romancing the Stone, Dean Cundey. I know, right? Have a seat. And it is a huge honor. Are there any like visual effects nerds out here? Okay. We have a legend here tonight. He started the year I was born on Star Wars. He worked on The Empire Strikes Back, on the Raiders of the Lost Ark franchise, on Indiana Jones, on Terminator, anything you can imagine. Dennis Muren. All right. So here's what I would like. Thank you all for coming. I know that most of you here are the kind of fans who have seen all the Blu-ray documentaries, and you've seen everything on YouTube that has documented the making of this incredible film. I'm hoping that tonight, I have a bunch of questions, but I'm just going to forget them. I'm hoping that tonight we can hear some stories that nobody has ever heard before. We can hear all the stuff that isn't on any of those documentaries that you're going to pull out of your deep memory right now to bring us something that is new and fresh. Go deep, Dean. Go all the way back. John, I'm going to start with you because we were talking backstage and I asked you for a very specific memory, and you had one that had to do with the last shot that you guys shot on Jurassic Park.
Yeah. So before we begin, you guys all know that Dean played the ship captain that Nedry talks to on the dock, right? Yeah. Okay, it's very important. He's a much better cameraman than he's an actor. Where's my award? So I want to tell you about the very last shot we did on the film. It was a retake in the Airstream trailer, and it was a shot of Lord Attenborough, Richard Attenborough, sitting on the counter and raising his champagne glass on a toast. You guys know all know that scene, right? Now, when we did the movie, Steven never did more than 7 takes of any setup. He shot it very much like a television show. We do 7 takes, he'd print one, and we move on. So we're doing this last shot. Remember Dean? He does 1 take, 2 takes, 5 takes, 7 takes, 10 takes, 15 takes, 20 takes. Finally, I take Steven by the elbow and pull him aside, and I say, "Steven, enough." And he says, "You don't understand, this is my drug." He was so dedicated and didn't want to give up directing the film. Now, you have to remember, in 6 weeks, he was going to be directing Schindler's List. It wasn't like he was going into retirement. But it just increased my admiration for the man so incredibly. He was the most incredible person to work with. So that's one of my many stories.
So, and we'll get many of them. We'll get many more. Dean, whenever I have the privilege of sitting down with a cinematographer, I just like to have them read the script and have them think about the material and just tell me what they see, what colors they see, what kind of visual imagery comes to their head. So I'm just curious. I'm sure you read Michael Crichton's book. I know you talked to Steven about the film. When you heard you were going to make a movie about dinosaurs, what did you see?
Well, I think our frame of reference is always the films that went before. The dinosaur movies, the stop motion stuff. I mean, Ray Harryhausen's things, but a lot of stuff. So, it was like, well, this is going to be fun. I wonder how we're going to take it somewhere else. So one day, we're in this production meeting with Steven and various people around the table, and he's going through the storyboards. And he was counting the number of special effects shots because the studio had said, "Steven, you can have 150 shots with dinosaurs in them." And he said, "Oh, okay." So he would count, and he'd say, "Now we need another shot of how many are we?" That's 152. "Oh, okay. Let's go back and we'll remove these two." And so he was dedicated, right? Well, then Dennis comes in and to a meeting and says, I know we were going to do this with rubber dinosaurs in stop motion, but we think we can do this in the computer. And everyone said, the computer? Well, let's see the stuff. And Dennis said, well, we don't have anything yet, but wait right here. He came back a week later, and he had some of the first, was it? Okay, you can fix a couple of them. And he had the wireframe of the dinosaurs. And Steven said, wow, that's really impressive. The animation is, and Phil Tippett was doing the animation. The tail is heavy and it's got follow through. All this stuff is better than the stop motion. What's it look like with skin on? And Dennis said, well, wait right here. And he came back a week or so later, and here it had gray skin on it. It looked like a gray rubber thing, but it moved so well. And Steven said, yeah, but what about scales and color and everything? Dennis said, well, wait right here. So he came back and showed stuff, and it had color, and then it had shadows, and in the meantime, we said, okay, we're going to do it that way. Nobody's ever done it before. We'll do it that way. And it wasn't until we were almost halfway through the movie that we really started to see finished dinosaurs. And we started, well, that shot right there, the Brontosaurus eating, was the first shot we saw. And we were then convinced that we were on an unusual new road, and we have to thank Dennis and his team for taking us down a journey, taking us on a journey that's never been done before. And you know, everyone does it now. You can do it in your laptop in your mother's basement if you're so inclined. But you know, you look back at that movie and realize nobody had done it before.
I would argue may never do it again. You know, and I'll move on to you, Dennis, because Dennis, you're the reason why I hear so often that the dinosaurs will never look as good as they did in 1993. That was you. And my question for you, and please, you know, tell a longer story if you have one, but you're halfway through this shoot, and as Dean just said, they hadn't seen any of the dinosaurs yet. They didn't know if it was going to work. If it didn't work, what were you going to do? Like, what was the alternative?
Well, that's part of why I had to make sure it was going to work. So we tested everything we could. It looked like it was going to work. The backup, if there was some disaster, was Phil Tippett. So we could still go back and do a crash thing on getting the stop motion puppets done with go motion to be used. We were going to add blurs to the stop motion to make them look better. It would look better than probably any stop motion that had been done, but it wouldn't have been anywhere near what Jurassic was, and with computers. And so that was, that was the mind-boggling seeing the early tests for me even on it, having grown up seeing dinosaurs and loving them and going to museums and having books and everything. And then I wasn't sure we were going to do it, and a couple of the guys at ILM, Mark DePay and Steve Williams, kept pursuing this. Hey, we got to try to get this to work, get it to work. And I thought we might be able to do a stampede, which ended up being the Gallimimus, so we could have them off in the distance running and maybe kind of close, but they'd be all blurry. But to do something big like a T-Rex, that was going to be incredibly tough. But every test that we did worked. And this is with a small team of like 15 people. And it worked and worked, and Kathy was behind it, Stephen was behind it, and the crew, both these guys and everybody else who was on the set, gave us what we needed and gave us the time and the confidence, because there could have been a lot of bickering, and what's going on here isn't going to work, blah, 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 but everyone was behind it. So, and I think because ILM had and still got a pretty darn good track record. I mean, and Roger and the Star Wars films and all that, so they knew, hey, this could be something here.
Well, and it was, and I feel like there's two sides of the visual effects in a Jurassic Park film. There is what the computer can do, and then I think even more astoundingly at times, there's what animatronics can do. And I think I know that the animatronics in the early films are something that will never be matched again, almost because I think a lot of us, people get scared. We heard that it didn't work and it shook and it rained on it, but it did work. And it was spectacular to watch, and that's why in Fallen Kingdom, which hopefully you guys will, there is another Jurassic movie coming out. We use many more animatronics in that film, and it's something that it changes the feel of any scene they're in. It allows the actors to be tactile and close to them. Tell us a story about your experience with the animatronics.
Well, the T-Rex was the most remarkable thing I'd ever seen. It was a full-size Tyrannosaurus Rex without legs. It was on a motion base, which was used for flight simulation. It weighed, I think, 3 tons. We could only move it overnight. It was an all-night process to move it around Stage 16 at Warner's. But it worked almost flawlessly once it started working. I remember Stan kept asking me, can we do something? We were scheduled to start with it on a day. And he came to me and said, it's not quite ready. Do you have stuff to go to? And of course I had a bunch of storyboards we could shoot that didn't involve the T-Rex. And we kept shooting him and shooting him and shooting him. And at the end of the day, Stephen went to Kathy Kennedy and said, hey, I've shot all the extra stuff. Isn't that great? And Kathy goes, no, that's not good. If the T-Rex doesn't work, we have nothing to shoot. Well, I tell you, Stan and his team got that thing to work so beautifully. It was the most amazing thing to see these 5 or 6 puppeteers operate this little, what was called a Waldo, which is like a small version of the T-Rex, and see this enormous machine move beautifully. It was breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking. It was the most incredible puppet you can imagine seeing.
Yeah, I have to say I was really kind of dumbfounded because I've worked with creatures and devices and stuff that are hydraulic, and if you ever watch a guy with a backhoe, it goes like this, and then it goes like this, and then it goes like this, and it goes like this. And so when he said, well, we're going to use hydraulics, and I said, oh, that'll be interesting. Well, they had the most elaborate computer feedback of when it was going to come to the end, and it would slow it down, and then over here, and it would speed it up. And I was completely amazed by this thing, to stand underneath a giant T-Rex and watch it move fluidly. It was amazing. I had to go over and try it. Oh yeah, they let me go over to the Waldo, and I moved it a little, and I moved it. I said, this is amazing. They said, that's enough. But it was amazing.
And it was as dangerous as it is in the films, the way it looks. I mean, it could kill people because it was that power to be able to move it that quickly and stop it that fast and all. A funny thing is, one of the things Stan said at the beginning of the film is, I think we can do this. No rain, no water or anything. Yeah, no rain, no water, Stan. Don't worry about it. First day shooting, it's raining out here. So now here's the character that was not supposed to be in the rain. They're trying to keep it off of it, but water is still getting all over it. So, but it made the movie better. So.
I have to tell you guys a story. Stan Winston brought Fay Wray to the set. Now, if you know who Fay Wray is, she was in the original King Kong. She was in her late 80s. Still beautiful. You could absolutely see that was the same woman. And I went up to her and I introduced myself. And I said, what do you think of it? Because she's seeing this T-Rex. And she said, well, I wish we'd had this on King Kong.
Dennis, you just mentioned something, it was an accident. You didn't know the rain was going to fall. Suddenly, this dinosaurs in the rain is the most amazing thing any of us have ever seen. What are some accidents that you remember happening that turned into something that was an incredible part of the film? Anyone?
Yeah, I'll throw something out, which is, at the end of the movie, the T-Rex comes back and kills the other raptors and then knocks the sign down. Well, that's not in the script. Stephen came to us when we were in the middle of the sequence and said, I think we have to bring the T-Rex back. The audience is going to want to see the T-Rex. And he was absolutely right, but we hadn't planned for any of that. That whole thing of the T-Rex, of the bones breaking up. Michael Lanterry, who was our special effects genius on the show, had to rig that in like 24 hours. It was an off-the-cuff thing. And then Dennis, you guys had no storyboards. You had no plans for this whatsoever. and they pulled it all together, and it was a testament both to Steven's genius, Michael's genius, Stan Winston's genius, and Dennis's genius, and then Dean for shooting it beautifully.
And the reason that you use CG or practical animatronics is there's limitations to the animatronics. So we get as much as we could withstand. Then you get to the CG stuff, if it has to be more mobile and walk and stuff like that. Well, that whole ending, there was no other way to do it, where you see the whole animal and it's moving that quickly and a raptor jumped on its back and it's floating, and that was all CG that was just winged on the set that day. And I think it was like, I don't know, a month until the delivery or some horribly short time for those shots. And I never knew we could get that close on the T-Rex or even a raptor and have it hold up. It seemed like at some point it's going to start looking CG. And we did it by analyzing nature, just studying nature and setting goals and not going too crazy on what we wanted to do, just keep it constrained for the shot and good enough to be in the movie. No better than that.
And I think Phil Tippett, who really thinks he is a dinosaur, was hugely instrumental in making the creatures move correctly and look correctly. That was his enormous. He's going to be here tomorrow night if you guys come back. So,
spoiler, man.
And I have to say, Phil had been doing stop motion animation for all of his. The Pillsbury Doughboy, if anybody remembers that, but an awful lot of stop motion. And we saw actually a little test with a raptor running that was stop motion that he had done. It was pretty impressive. There was follow through and movement and all the good stuff you need. And then when Dennis said, yeah, we're going to do it in the computer, there were those of us who said, oh, there goes poor Phil's job from now on. But he did the animation. He adapted so quickly, and the animation is so great because of him. And I think he understood movement and all, and it was not about the tool, it was about the artistry.
Yeah, one of the problems with CG is that some directors will ask for anything, even if it's impossible to do it. They want the raptor to jump from here down here in a fraction of a second and grab you and pull you out in a fraction of a second because it sounds exciting, but it won't look real. So that's the deal. Phil would keep it real. And knowing what reality is and within that constraint, that's what it took to do it.
That's something that astounds me is how the understanding of physics that's necessary, of actual animal movement and studying how animals fight each other and how slow they often move and how the stillness in an animal and how you were able to match that both in the animatronics and in the computer. It sounds so, it's almost like reductive to say in the computer, whenever we say that. It's an art, and those animators are artists.
And the computer does nothing. I mean, we have simulations we can do of things that are falling, breaking apart and stuff, but they're usually wrong. You still have to look at it and saying, I have to fix this, I have to fix that. You have to recognize it first, always working within this constrained reality.
Well, I'm just kind of curious. I feel like when you're making a movie that is groundbreaking the way that this is, you have to feel the energy of that while you're doing it. Just because not everyone knows what they're doing all the time on any movie, we're always trying to figure it out. On something like this, what was the energy on this movie? Did you guys feel like you were doing something that was going to have this kind, like we were going to be sitting in front of all these people who love this movie so much while you were making it?
Well, I have to say I sit in front of this thing and look around and say, who'd have thought that a movie would capture the imagination of so many people, and have this kind of aftermath to it. But I think a lot of it is the fact that we all kind of sensed we were doing something new and different. And when you do that and you dedicate yourself to taking it the next step, and you have the sense that the story is interesting in the first place, so the audience will want to go see it. But you then have to come up to that with all of the technicality and the artistry and everything you do. And I'm so, sort of rewarded and proud of the fact that here we are sitting to an audience 25 years later, is it? What is something come out? 26, is it? all of whom, or some of whom, were not born at the time, but the movie has captured their imagination and their love of story and characters and the spectacle. You know, to me, it's a very rewarding kind of endeavor we did, and a rewarding business.
This was a huge job for me. I had never worked on a picture this big before, and so many of the crew had done a number of films with Stephen. Dean had worked with Stephen on Hook and other films, and it was. You talk about the energy of the set. I was like a kid in a candy store because I was working with people who were at the absolute top of their craft, and and no one gave more to the movie than Stephen. Stephen gave 120%, and so we were all trying to reach the level that he was dedicated. He was a man who was running a $1 billion company, and yet he was completely focused on making this movie. It was hugely inspiring, and I mean, I just couldn't wait to get to work every day.
But I have to say, I had done a Hook with him, and it was such a love of making that movie for him that we went over schedule, over budget, but it was, you know, he was making that movie. And he came to me towards the end and said, you know, Universal wants me to make this little dinosaur movie. Would you like to work on it? I said, dinosaurs, who wouldn't? And so he made his little dinosaur movie, and here we are today.
And we all thought it was a little dinosaur movie, too. It just seemed like that's what it was going to be. Like, we thought E.T. was a little movie also. You know, I'm probably sitting up here calm. We all kind of are. But for me, until it was done, it was terrifying. And, you know, I was excited because we'd never seen this stuff before. But I tell you, 50 times a day was like sheer terror. Because that something could go wrong, and we had to figure out how to solve this, and there was no way to solve it. We thought everything was right, and you looked at it, and it wasn't. What is it? We're just analyzing it, and, you know, I had done T2 with Jim Cameron before this. And both of those were really tough, but this, with the shorter schedule, was just a really stressful thing, but I would certainly do it again. I mean, any of us would. You know, you don't get these opportunities to do things that are, you know, like childhood dreams, and just have everybody see it, work on something, and millions of people see it. It's great. There are opportunities. They're not, they're tough, but you got to take them. Take a chance.
I have to say a couple things. Stephen was in a wonderful mood throughout the shoot, I felt. Part of the reason is that we kept gaining time. We kept saving time. We finished the film 13 days ahead of schedule, which is unheard of for a film this complicated. So he was in a very good mood. But in terms of the feeling on the set, I think when we saw that first shot of the Brachiosaur in dailies that one day, which was halfway through the production, which was revelatory as much to us as it is to you when you saw the film for the first time, of Sam and Laura looking up at the Brachiosaur, and the camera pans up and you see him. At that moment, we all knew this was going to be a terrific movie. I mean, we thought we were doing a good movie anyway, but that sort of cemented it, and it just reinvigorated the energy on the set that much more.
If you look at that, you see what Stephen has put into it. Not only the shot design, but they walk up there and wonder. They're like kids looking at, look at that. They point up, you see it, and they walk by. It's like, look, it's a what? It's a dinosaur, and it's like, how can it get any better? And they look up, and there's a shot looking at the neck, and it's way up there, and it's like, you think, how can it get any better? And then it grabs the leaves and pulls the leaves off like it's eating, like animals that we know all the time. And then it cuts back to this wide shot, and you see it chewing as leaves are falling down. One great idea on top of another, on top of another, on top of another.
And then it hits the ground, and you hear it hit the ground.
Yeah, and
it was the camper.
It gets up on its hind legs like a dog sits or something, and goes down. You know, it's just, he's a great director for that. That's great stuff.
I think there is something about these movies, because our film was very similar. It was such a warm family, and you guys came, you were there. The environment on that movie, I think we're also just humbled by not just the fact that we get to make a Jurassic movie, but the fact that there were dinosaurs in the first place. Like, how can you possibly raise your voice or get angry when you're in the shadow of these magnificent animals? And one thing I want to mention, because I remember a very specific moment on, I called it Jurassic Park. I called the next movie Jurassic Park 5. Like, I insist, I won't change it. But on Jurassic Park 4, Sherry Crichton came, and Sherry's here tonight. I don't know if anyone can see her, but Sherry Crichton, the late Michael Crichton's wife, who brought their son, Michael. And I remember we had the animatronic Apatosaurus, John Rosengrant, who will also be here tomorrow, was operating the Apatosaurus, and her son reached out and he fed her grass. He fed grass to this live animal who ate the grass out of his hand. And I remember the look on the kids' faces when that happened, and I felt like one of them. It's amazing. So we almost have to go, but I just wanted to ask one last question, which is, as you go on, I don't know if you have children, if you have grandchildren, if you're going to tell one story, if you're going to tell them one thing that you remember about your time on this movie, what's the thing that just pops into your head that stands out that was just a completely magical moment that you can share with everybody here?
Working with Steven. I mean, just watching him work was... I learned more in 6 months on that film than I'd learned in 15 years before that. And I think I'm still learning from having worked with him.
Yeah, and I'd have to say, I consider Steven one of the absolutely best visual storytellers, not only in recent history, but potentially in film history. He's created so many iconic, storytelling shots and devices, and so I think having worked with him and been that close to watch the process and be part of the process, And I look back at, one of my favorite sequences that I show a lot of times to classes is the raptors in the kitchen with the kids. It's such a complete visual story, how the camera moves and all is there, but also how the CG dinosaurs moved and the animatronic ones, how they all fit together into one storytelling sequence. It stands alone. I mean, you can run that and say, oh, that was intriguing without even having seen the rest of the movie.
Yeah, everybody did a great job in this film. One of the things I came in with is the most important is teamwork. Is the camaraderie of everybody working together under immense pressure under a hurricane. We got shut down because of Hurricane Aniki over there. Had to go back later and shoot the Gallimima sequence. But everybody working together in cooperation with each other to get this done in a short time frame really shows you the power of a group effort. You're all on the same page. Even if you're not, you'll wrangle some people onto that page eventually. Because I grew up kind of doing this stuff by myself, and most of my friends did. But getting to work with a team and see a lot of like-minded people, you can do far more than you can do on your own. And I just, between the whole live-action crew and the ILM crew, it was just great as a team working together. I want to say, Colin, you did a great job in your show.
Oh, thanks.
Yes, you did.
Absolutely.
Yes, you did.
Well,
You captured it.
thank you. Well, that as we made that film and as we made this last film that you guys will all get to see, like, you can feel, and Jay Bayona, who did an incredible job, he is such a deep fan of this as well. And when we talk about legacy, it's not just legacy of a movie, it's a legacy of people. And you are the people who made this thing that we love. And we talk about what you did all the time, and we try not to emulate it too much. We try not to rip it off. We try to move forward. But it's hard because we love it so much. And so thank you so much for what you've done, and for everyone that you represent who isn't here. Thanks to everyone who made this movie. All right, guys. Thank you, and also to you. I'm getting played off, but real quick, I didn't win anything. Thank you for, we haven't really had an event like this before, where we've had all of our fans come together. And it means so much to me and everybody who works on these movies that we have people who love this as much as we do. So thank you for coming. You're going to go up and watch Jurassic Park right now. There's something you don't expect that you're also going to get to see up there. There's more surprises in store. Thank you so much for coming. Good night.